Welcome, weary traveler, to this video, which was originally supposed to be about a completely different topic, but well, things happened. And also, Shadow of the Earth Tree came out, and boy did that make me feel things. Long story short, I started writing a script, except it wasn't a script, it was an unhinged rant, because Shadow of the Earth Tree annoyed me so much that I was, for the first time in years, seriously contemplating making an actual real YouTube video. However, at the same time I was also playing Warframe, and specifically I was going through the new war quest, and I was so impressed with how well that was put together that I suddenly had no desire to start a YouTube channel with a negative rant. And also said rant just wasn't very good. In the end, I love Warframe's story and I want to talk about it. And nobody can stop me since this is my channel and I can do whatever I want with it. That includes talking about how a space ninja farming simulator has one of the best written eldritch horror entity antagonists ever put into a video game. In my opinion. I feel like in this internet age of absolutes, I should continuously clarify that this is my opinion. If the writing doesn't work for you, that is fine. Art is subjective and horror doubly so. So, sit down, relax, and let us do some analyzing, shall we? Spoilers for Chains of HeroQuest and partially for War Within, Second Dream and Whispers in the Walls, and of course 1999. And for the love of all, if you have yet to play Second Dream, get away from this video. Come watch this at a later date, otherwise I am gonna ruin one of the best quest sequences in video gaming history, okay? Part 1. Setup. The Chains of HeroQuest. The first time the man in the wall makes his presence known to the player is at the very end of War Within. But at this point you've been through so many mind-boggling experiences that you most likely just chalk this up to weird QA nonsense and move on. What truly sets up the man in the wall as an antagonistic force is the Chains of HeroQuest. From the get-go you know this quest is gonna be unlike any other you did up to this point, since the haunting message that starts it all clearly communicates that yep, we're doing horror now, hope you're not playing this late at night. The reason this message comes across as highly unsettling is twofold: sounds and visuals. Those two components together establish the very specific mood that reads to us, players, as horror adjacent. The message proper starts with just 3 sounds forming a clear and easily noticeable pattern, the infamous tap. All 3 words forming the sound are read out loud in a very specific cadence, and this cadence is always the same whenever the pattern emerges. This helps the otherwise very simple rap tap tap stand out and tells you, the player, that this sound pattern is important. The way the words are read also gives it a slightly sinister undertone right from the get-go. After that, we hear a woman's voice speaking, quietly but very precisely. Her tone is measured and calm. It contrasts sharply with the stark quality of the other voice, which sounds almost too clear and too close, like the speaker is standing next to you, or, more disturbingly, behind you. You learn later that the whispering voice is Rel, and the woman is called Paladino. From the moment Paladino starts speaking, so right after the first rap tap tap, the sound of a gong can be heard in the background of the message, which for one gives the message gravitas, yes, but also creates a sense of urgency. This feeling is further amplified as the background sound gets louder and louder before abruptly stopping, so that the last spoken word we hear from the message is a whispered tap. Very sinister, huh? Visually, the approach is much simpler, but no less effective. The screen starts getting darker and darker as the message continues, but this darkness has a deep red undertone which makes it feel sinister, but also puts you, the player, on high alert because we associate the color red with danger. By the last rap tap tap, the screen is completely dark. It then returns to the normal through the red filter as Ordis commands on the message being haunted. I'm sorry. Halted. Yeah, sure, Ordis is definitely just halted. Why is this little message so important? Because it sets the tone for the entire quest and in turn for the man in the wall himself. But more on that later. The quest then continues by giving you a seemingly standard mission to explore an old ship in hopes of finding the source of the message. And there we can see a clever subversion of expectations. When you arrive at the ship, it is not only dark, but also silent. Throughout the game, the player comes to expect the ships to be filled with background noise, clanking, stomping, Grineer talking, and so on. It's a part of the environment, you don't actively notice it while playing. What you do notice, however, is the sudden lack of it. And the unexpected silence makes this mission more disturbing than if the ship was simply dark, but with the usual sounds. You instantly know that something is deeply wrong, not just because of the subversion of expectations, but also you're a smart cookie. You know your tropes, and complete silence in a space setting? That's never a good thing. Of course, the mission isn't played in a complete silence. You can hear your footsteps and gunshots, which is not helping the sense of unease at all. You can of course hear Lotus talking, though she is very reserved, almost whispering, as if she herself is unnerved by the situation. And as you progress through the dark ship, you get sound cues whenever you find important clues, be it scattered items or messages written in blood. Yikes. The sound is, of course, very suspenseful, further putting the player on edge. So when the Red Veil fanatics jumpscare you, it's almost a relief because, hey, something that can be fought. You eventually make your way to Palladino, who is fending off attackers in the only part of the ship that has light. This visually tells you that you are safe from the distressing darkness, for now, that you are back, partially, in the normal mission structure, and that this is the light at the end of the tunnel, as in the person with answers. Of course, it is there that you then hear Rel's rap-tap-tap again, whispered unnervingly straight into your ear, which breaks the sense of safety and familiarity. The following defense of Palladino features Red Veil fanatics walking strangely, almost as if in trance, or if we want to use a horror trope, like zombies. But it's fine, those can be fought, everything is fine. Everything is not fine. Finishing the mission yields no more clues, so you go visit Palladino in Iron Wake in hopes of getting some answers to the question, what the hell is going on? And while you do get some answers, you mostly get more questions. Also, you witness Palladino doing some sort of ritual accompanied by flickering lights and uncomfortable sounds. Also black flames, which, lady, are you sure that's normal? But the ritual ultimately fails. Palladino seems to think this failure is due to her missing a sacred relic, and so off to the wild we go, looking for it. Adventure! And by that I mean more jump scares awaits. It is worth noting that at this point in the quest, Lotus is extremely skeptical of Palladino's ritual, doubting that Rel exists, which you can clearly hear in her voice. However, she wants the answers as much as you, the player, do, so we just go along with Palladino's suggestions. And so you go to another dark and silent ship, but at least this time, your objective is significantly clearer than look around for weird stuff. That doesn't mean there isn't weird stuff around. Oh no. You can find more messages written in blood or oil? It's hard to say. One of which directly references the dream, which Lotus finds confusing, so Palladino clarifies that Rel is, in fact, a Tenno, same as the player, only not exactly the same. This is a good moment to say out loud what the game is very strongly hinting at. Look, it's not even subtext, it's basically text, it's so blatant, but for the sake of clarity, Rel is on the autistic spectrum. He is shown struggling to comprehend emotions, and it is implied that he has issues communicating with others and presumably socializing in general. It is this difference that made him an outcast among the other Tenno, and, according to Palladino, he was literally cast out by Margulis, because I guess she had that Orokin efficiency-driven mindset or something. One can even take his repetition of rap-tap-tap as a form of stimming. Let's get back to the quest now. From this point on, Rel speaks more, but his whispering is irregular. Some words are quiet, as if he is far, while others are much louder, as if he's right next to you. This makes his speech unnerving, but also indicates that someone is listening, or at least Rel thinks so. He says as much in the message at the start of the quest. He's listening. But this drives the point home further. But also, at this part of the quest, you simply don't know enough to have a clear picture of what is happening. So as you follow the creepy whispering while trying to find the relic, you are free to think that both Rel and Palladino are simply insane. If only things were so simple. Following the whispers, fun fact, you can at times hear rap tap tap, occasionally glimpsing something, and I'm sure that's fine and not an indication of things to come. And getting jump scared by the suspenseful sounds. Thanks, sound designers, you find the relic in question, and that's when things go wrong. Of course, we can't have nice things. I mean, the fact that the relic is surrounded by dead bodies is a clear warning sign. But hey, we are the Tenno. We are almost always the scariest thing in the room. What is there to be afraid of? Things you cannot shoot, for example, like ghosts or puzzles. And sudden turns when you're playing Gauss. On a more serious note, this is an excellent bit of environmental storytelling. The game clearly communicates that you are not the first one to come here, presumably for this relic, and that the others met a fate most grim. A fate you, the player, almost meet too. Ezreal makes his displeasure at you taking his relic known by sending what you hope are more fanatics, but are probably ghosts, to chase after you. And so you do the only thing you can.
Run.
Once you make it out of the haunted ship, you join Palladino for another ritual, and this time, with the help of the relic, it is successful. Palladino and you contact Rel. You then see presumably a memory of Rel's, consisting of him trying to identify emotions while a woman's voice guides him. This is Rel's mother, and she speaks very kindly and patiently, never raising her voice even if Rel makes a mistake. Also, if you're on the spectrum yourself, which I am, then welcome to the hardest puzzle of the game ever. What do you mean people normally do this quickly? Rel himself has a somewhat peculiar cadence to his speech, putting pauses where normally one wouldn't and stretching pronunciation of some syllables. This makes his sentences sound halted, as if talking is painful or difficult for him. Keep that irregular speech cadence in mind for later in the quest, okay? Palladino also brings up a direct link between the Void and Rel, which somehow caused him suffering. You do not yet know how at this point in the quest. And she references a harrowing sacrifice, something that was hinted at in the bloody writings before. This is not the first time the game brings up the Void as a potentially dangerous place, but it is the first time you are directly told that traveling through it has consequences and is most certainly a very bad idea. Because while the Orokins seem to have understood that the Void exposure can damage human minds, it was Rel, and only Rel, that saw the truth, that there is an entity, indifferent, existing in the Void.
The man in the wall.
The quest then sends you to capture fragments of Rel, the manifestations of his emotions, which for me personally was a nightmarish trio of missions because I got overwhelmed by all the noise and flickering lights. Sensory issues are fun. The game shifts its focus a little, and from here on it's about giving Rel the rest he deserves, because you discover that he gave up his humanity to fuse with his Warframe, so he would be able to last against the man in the wall for much longer than a human lifespan would allow. Anyhow, you get to see more messages, flickering lights, accompanied by horrible sounds, and the ghost of Rel following you around, whispering, "Rat, tap, tap." Aren't you having fun in this space adventure game? If you make it to the finale of the quest without uninstalling the game, congrats! You get to meet the man in the wall almost in person. This confrontation is made significantly worse by the fact that you do the last portion of the quest as the operator, without your Warframe. This last mission sees you going into the Red Whale Temple, where Rel, as Harrow, his Warframe, is chained to a pillar or some sort of central structure. Your task is to destroy the chains that bind him, which can only be done by blasting them with void energy, hence why you need to come here as the operator. Each time you destroy a chain, a bunch of Red Veil fanatics pour in, and you have to fight them. As you destroy the chains, you keep hearing a voice, like Rel's, but not. This is the man in the wall speaking through Rel. This is why I earlier mentioned Rel's peculiar speech cadence. When the man in the wall speaks in Rel's voice, the cadence is different, more in line of what we would consider normal, and the voice also sounds much more confident. You get a direct comparison to Rel's voice, since he speaks when you destroy all the chains, voicing his worry about the man in the wall and then his desire to sleep and rest forever. As the player allows him his rest, they take up the promise to keep the vigil against the man in the wall. So, hell of a first impression for the man in the wall, huh? Let's quickly summarize how exactly Chains of Harrow sets him up as an antagonistic force. It's all up close and personal. We see the man in the wall through Rel, we see how it all affects him, and we sympathize. It's much easier to conclude that the man in the wall is bad, because he kept torturing a child for centuries. His existence is ambivalent at first. He is dismissed by Lotus, and possibly the player, as a delusion, but from the start there is also a strong possibility of him being actually real. His motives are unknown, but are probably nothing good, because, again, he tortured a child for centuries. This, meaning the Chains of Harrow quest, is the first time the Void is mentioned to have a sentient entity connected to it. You have no clear idea how this relates to your character exactly and what it means for the future. The quest doesn't forcibly make you weaker, like War Within did, but it introduces a force that cannot be fought normally, resulting in a similar feeling of helplessness and vulnerability. And lastly, strong visual and sound direction, which creates a very specific mood the player is put in for the whole quest, and which in turn gives the man in the wall a certain flavor. Specifically, the irregular sound volume and repeated patterns are the key components of the haunting atmosphere of the Chains of Harrow quest, even more so than the visuals, I'd argue. The sound design overall does a lot of the heavy lifting. Sound is, after all, a way to indicate the presence of something unseen. Part 2. Presence. The Chains of Harrow quest clearly communicates that whatever the man in the wall may be, it's nothing good. But the next quest in line is Apostasy Prologue, followed by the Sacrifice, which both focus on the Lotus, Tenno, Warframes, and introduce Ballas as another antagonistic force. The conflict with Ballas is much more personal for the player, since he steals the Lotus, and so you quickly forget about the nebulous threat of the man in the wall. But the Void entity doesn't forget about you. Once you have his attention, there is nowhere to run. After you finish the Chains of Harrow, the man in the wall starts appearing in your orbiter, which is once again a clever way of showing that this is a threat unlike any other you, the player, ever faced, because up to this point, all the weird and spooky stayed in the mission and did not follow you into your ship. Whenever the man in the wall pops up, his main goal seems to be taunting you, and overall being an absolute nuisance. He usually either greets you with, "Hey, kiddo," or he simply laughs and seems to like sitting on the codex console like an absolute heathen. He doesn't have a fixed form of his own, instead he mirrors your operator, but with solid black eyes without pupils and a creepy smile. Worse still, unlike in the Chains of Harrow, where the man in the wall was clearly only interacting with Rel, this time he is talking directly to you. Congratulations, you are now officially being haunted by untold horrors from outer space. Yes, I'm aware that his presence in your ship can be very brief if you speedrun the main questline, but shh. The man in the wall has few other appearances. Near the end of the Sacrifice, where he will ask you if you are feeling better after you witness Umbra's memories, and during the construction of your railjack, if you do it after War Within, that is. There he sits on the top of the reliquary drive and simply says, "Took you long enough." This one appearance jump scared me so bad. I got used to him haunting my ship, but did not expect him to haunt another incomplete ship. Sheesh. While these brief interactions are annoying and potentially a bit unsettling, they do not necessarily come across as sinister or threatening. Up until the Chimera prologue. There the man in the wall is directly trying to torment you with twisted visions of the Lotus, while wearing her helmet and mocking you. Not verbally, he mostly just cackles, but by doing weird poses. He does eventually lead you to a portal, and if you step through, you get a vision of Ballas's current, predicament. But the man in the wall definitely doesn't bring you the news from the goodness of his heart. No such thing as a free lunch, after all, and definitely not when you're dealing with weird void entities. As to what his goals are, well, you have no idea. No choice but to continue with the game, huh? The man in the wall pops up at the very end of New War, right after you triumph over Ballas, to remind you that the true danger is still out there, watching you. He manifests as your warped twin, wearing the Lotus's helmet, sitting on top of something I'd describe as a wall relief of the Vitruvian man, notably missing a finger and a half of his face, and grinning unnaturally. He laughs and says what sounds to you like nonsense at the moment, but he says it in a very deep, reverberating voice, so it sounds sinister regardless. Whether this is the true form of the man in the wall, or if he simply manifests like this because Rel kept calling him the man in the wall, you don't know. Me personally, I prefer the latter interpretation. Though it is kind of funny if Rel was being literal and he really is just a man literally stuck in a wall. Of course, the man in the wall appears in Operator's memories in New War, where it is remembered that Operator made some sort of deal with the entity, but there isn't that much to say about that particular exchange. The man in the wall is once again manifested as a reflection of your operator, and he has the black eyes and the creepy smiles, and he offers you his hand to shake. Scared and seeing no other way out, your operator accepts and seals their fate forever. Once again, a vaguely threatening presence, but nothing we haven't seen before. One of the best ways the game keeps reminding you that the man in the wall is still out there, still watching, is when you come across something that speaks of his influence, but he doesn't manifest directly. In Duviri, you can find several testing tablets from the Zariman, which you encounter during the New War in your memories of the Zariman. 6 of those appear to have been tampered with by the man in the wall, and through those he is seemingly talking directly to you. Once again, this is a subtle reminder of his presence, told purely through the environment. Even if you can't see him, he can still see you, and he is getting closer. The tablets range from vaguely menacing to this is 100% absolutely a threat. And of course, I'm the one in the position of power. Big oof. I personally played Duviri before New War and only found the corrupted tablets after finishing both New War and the Whispers in the Wall, so it was super spooky for me. But I have no idea if I was just blind and did not find the tablets before, or if they appeared afterwards. It definitely helped to make me feel unsettled and actually dreadful of the man in the wall slowly spreading presence. So, we've talked about the more subtle indications of his presence, and now we get to the quest where the influence of the man in the wall is the most palpable. Whispers in the walls. Well, duh, it's in the name and all. In this quest, the game switches focus from the Tenno to the person who had the dubious honor of being the first one to meet the man in the wall, Albrecht Entrati. Much like the Chains of Harrow, Whispers in the Wall starts with a sequence that sets up the tone for the rest of the quest, this time in the form of a cutscene. And what a setup! We see Albrecht's laboratories, golden and gleaming, pristine and perfect. Then the camera pans and we see the man himself, but from the back, and dressed strangely, very un-Orokin-like in fact. He is holding a pager of all things, and the beeping sound it makes is very jarring amidst all the golden perfection. Of course, if you've been paying attention, you realize that the game is once again setting up an important yet simple audio clue. Speaking of auditory experiences, the background music gives the cutscene almost an Egyptian feel. I bet it's due to the woodwind instrument used, possibly a bassoon, but I am no expert in musical instruments, so what do I know? But the soundtrack, combined with the golden splendor and the emptiness, does evoke the feeling of something grand that is nonetheless gone, a relic of the past buried beneath the sands of time. One can't help but wonder, is this a glistening golden lap or a gilded tomb? We also see Albrecht's beloved Kavat Kalimos, though we don't know her by name yet, and Lloyd, Albrecht's lab assistant and lover. We already get a little bit of characterization for Albrecht. Kalimos visibly receives more affection than Lloyd does, and they are the only two beings, aside from Albrecht himself, there, as far as we can see. Which tells us that either Albrecht is doing something in utmost secret, or that these are the only two confidants he has left. Well, I guess I am making an assumption here that such a big lab would be manned by more people. I could be wrong, maybe Albrecht just needs a lot of space, but I digress. As the camera once again pans to show us more of the lab, it also shows that Albrecht has an old PC in his lab, which is baffling and contrasts sharply with the golden splendor of the rest of the place. Seriously, the lab even has golden chairs and desk. Guess the Orkin were really into gold. It's a great piece of visual information in a cinematic setup for a quest like this, because it instantly makes you ask questions and also establishes that there is something unusual going on in these labs. By the end of this cutscene, we see Albrecht lying down in a strange device together with Kalimos and saying what one can assume is a tender goodbye to Lloyd, before Lloyd smashes the casket-like device with a mallet and the scene fades to black. 10 out of 10 as far as transitions go. The quest proper, meaning the first actual mission, starts pretty innocently. You get a call from Lloyd, meaning the Necromech, asking for your assistance, and so you return to Deimos, ready to face any challenge. After all, at this point, you've seen everything Deimos can throw at you. Surely you can easily handle whatever this is, right? Right? Wrong. Lloyd leads you to a chamber, urging you to be quiet and not to wake up the family, which is rather suspicious, but you've been asked to do weirder things. Then it turns out the chamber has a secret entrance that leads down and down and down. The walls are covered in scribbles that overlap chaotically, giving the place a somewhat erratic feeling, almost as if you're seeing the walls of a prison cell, covered in the mad ramblings of a prisoner held there for far too long. And isn't that a very pointed visual metaphor, When you finally get to the lab, seriously so many stairs, and for what, Albrecht? You find it not only in a complete disarray, but also being eaten away by the man in the wall's influence. It's the first time his influence is physical enough to cause you direct harm. Up to this point, it was always either mental torment or physical hurt by some proxy, like the Void Angels. The Murmur, as are those void manifestations called, take on several forms, but most notably those of weird cubes and limbs. This may simply be how the void naturally manifests, or it could be influenced by how the characters think of the void. Remember, Entrati's daughter Aurelia once likened the void to a cube?
The void offers humanity the truer telling of eternalism that now is merely a facet of a great block.
And the limbs, well, I think that one is self-explanatory. Of course, it's not only through the Murmur that the man in the wall interacts with you, the player. Oh no, that would be far too easy. After all, the man in the wall embodies the notion of fighting something you cannot hit, something you cannot deal with by killing it. It's what makes him so different from all the previous threats. The fight with Narmer was a guerrilla war, yes, because you couldn't take on the whole empire. You had to be smart and choose your battles. But in the end, you dealt with the threat by taking out Ballas, and without the puppeteer, the entire ensemble crumbled. When it comes to the man in the wall, however, there is no head of the snake to cut off. And even if there was, I bet the head would just continue to laugh at you once you beheaded the snake. And laugh at you is what the man in the wall does throughout the entirety of the whispers in the walls. Nothing like some fresh psychological terror to remind you what you're up against, huh? As you follow along the quest objectives too, first, find the sleeper, later revealed to be Lloyd, the human, then, to hunt down any crumbs of information Albrecht left before his departure, the man in the wall follows along and keeps pitching in at the least opportune moments. His very first appearance in the quest is heralded by the rap-tap-tap, this time sounding almost like he is hitting something metallic. As your character steps into a dimly lit corridor, the game forces you to slow down to a walk, and you see a figure in front of you. As you approach, a strange noise can be heard, and then the entirety of the corridor wall in front of you gets torn away, revealing sand and stone, the man in the wall's influence, twisting the very reality around you. Desolate and barren, yet very much capable of hurting you. How better to depict indifference than with the image of an endless desert? The man in the wall's next appearance is during your little glimpse into the past, where he is either pretending to be Albrecht or possessing him. It's easy to tell them apart, however, for the man in the wall smiles his unnaturally wide, creepy smile. The figure tells you,
"You are late."
However, it's impossible to tell if that's Albrecht talking or the man in the wall. But let's put a pin in that. We will get to the time-related shenanigans a bit later. After this part, the man in the wall appears randomly and takes great pleasure in commenting on the current situation, mocking both you, Lloyd, and your efforts to fight against him. Visually, he is once again a twin to your operator, and often just sits around, cross-legged of course, or hangs over the ledges, completely ignoring gravity. As an eldritch entity from the void, I guess he can afford to disregard the laws of physics. An interaction of note is when you are sent to retrieve a page from the grimoire, which is Albrecht's diary or manual. Who even knows? Important thing is that it won't function properly without all the components, and that Lloyd hid it away. As you approach the doorway, the man in the wall appears and asks you to give the grimoire to him, stating it to be a part of your deal. This is the first time the man in the wall shows an explicit interest in a specific item, which really makes you wonder what is going on with Albrecht and what exactly his connection to the man in the wall is. And while the man in the wall is not desperate when asking the player for the grimoire, his voice has a forceful tone, which is unusual in itself, considering he always sounds unbothered by anything. Strange, isn't it? The finale of the Whispers in the Wall's quest underscores the point that the man in the wall cannot be fought directly with physical force. There is not a weapon powerful enough to cause him harm, since one, affection. In gameplay, this is presented as your character taking possession of one of Albrecht's vessels, which are giant humanoid constructs, and confronting the man in the wall, who is controlling another vessel, after you manage to relate the contents of the last grimoire page to Lloyd. At first, it seems like your character will punch the man in the wall in the face, but then they caress the cheeks of the corrupted vessel instead, showing affection and echoing Albrecht's goodbye to Lloyd. One can argue that maybe the man in the wall didn't want you to take the grimoire to Lloyd because he was feeding off Lloyd's contempt, so to speak, but we don't really know enough about the man in the wall at this point to say with certainty that it was the case. The very last cutscene of the Whispers in the Walls shows the man in the wall sitting cross-legged on a fancy chair, plucking leaves of a lotus flower, which is definitely not ominous at all, before the weird possessed Albrecht appears, saying, "We end as we began." Which, if that isn't foreshadowing, I'll eat my hat. The man in the wall then crushes the lotus flower, and I don't think I need to explain what exactly that visual metaphor is hinting at. Mom, I think we're in danger. Now, let's rewind a bit and take a closer look at how we ended up with the Kalimos sequence in the first place. You see, Albrecht is the inventor of void travel. It's his experiments that opened the door for the Urkin Empire to move further, and it's his experiments that drew the eye of the man in the wall. Before the entrance to the lab, you can see several tablets which detail Albrecht's experiments and his encounter with the void entity and how exactly that scarred him. There is no doubt that Albrecht found the man in the wall utterly terrifying, but clearly not terrifying enough to never touch anything void-related ever again. Or maybe he grew so desperate that there simply was no space for terror anymore. And oh, is Albrecht ever desperate to get rid of the attention of the man in the wall. So desperate, in fact, that his master plan involves time travel. For the sake of not diving too deep into Warframe lore and confusing literally everyone, myself included, let me simplify what exactly took place to the best of my knowledge and ability. You see, Albrecht's brilliant idea to escape his void-induced torment involves, drumroll please, messing with the void some more. That's the famed Orokin brilliance right there. But how exactly did Albrecht go about this? First, he assumed that the void entity takes on a form that is a reflection of what touches it. So he tried to put animals in, hoping that the man in the wall would get dumber and less human. That didn't work. Instead, the animals came out smarter and capable of speech. After several failures, Albrecht concluded that the only way to get rid of the man in the wall is to trap him. Taking inspiration from his visit to Duviri, Albrecht came up with a plan to force the man in the wall onto a single strand of Kra, aka into a specific single timeline, which he would then force to loop around itself, therefore making the void entity stuck, as there would no longer be an entry or exit point. Please don't forget to take my explanation with a grain of salt. We don't yet know the full extent of Albrecht's plan or what the man in the wall is actually capable of. This is my best attempt to make sense of it all, but I can be wrong on all accounts. Moving on. Why exactly Albrecht chose the year 1999, we don't know. Neither we know for sure why he decided to mess with the tech rod and make the protoframes, and how exactly the operator/drifter fits into his plans. Based on our previous experience with the Orokin, it's rather safe to assume that we are a pawn, to be used and discarded as Albrecht pleases, and that he expects obedience from us. That much is clear from the few interactions with him we have. After all, his goal is just, is it not? To clean the mess he made, to deal with the untold danger the void entity embodies? And yet, for all his sinister threats, the man in the wall may not even be the biggest issue for the player in the next story chapter, because Albrecht seems to be solving his problems by employing the tried and tested Orokin method of making yet more problems to solve the previous ones. I'm sure that in his own head, Albrecht is convinced that he is playing some 5D chess with God, and that he, Albrecht, will win. All the lives ruined and places destroyed? Necessary sacrifices for the greater good. A question is slowly emerging. Who exactly is the bigger monster? The man willingly sacrificing others, or the entity whose malice can very well be akin to the malice of a hurricane or of a tsunami? Maybe they will end up the same, just in a different position on the scale of distraction. Who can tell at this point in the story? Anyhow, back to the topic at hand, the existential horror from the void. We've outlined when and where the man in the wall makes his presence known, and how he keeps creeping ever closer. Now, it's time to talk about what this presence is. In other words, how does he come across? Lloyd calls the man in the wall the Indifference, which, if you remember, is how Palladino also described him way back in the Chains of Harrow. The name is both an apt description and a misleading one. The man in the wall is indifferent and does not seem to care for anything, up until you catch his attention. Then he cares way too much. So you better avoid poking at the void altogether. Shame nobody told Albrecht. The man in the wall has few other names, though he is very often referred to simply as the void entity. The other aliases allude to his incomprehensible nature, such as that which bears no name or the littlest eye.
You know of what I speak, Gandalf.
A great eye, lidless, wreathed in flame.
The eye of Sauron.
Wait, that's not right. The man in the wall always feels a little bit off, and therefore all his appearances have a sinister edge to them. For one, he's visually unsettling. The humanoid form he adopts is a twisted mirror to the player's character. Recognizable as the thing he is mimicking, yes, but also stretched slightly too much for comfort. It's the small details that mark the man in the wall as something other. He has black eyes without a pupil, a grin too wide to be possible with human anatomy, and his movements, when he deigns to move, are too animated, too exaggerated. I'd even say he's touching the border of the uncanny valley, but that's a bit harder to determine with stylized graphics. The man in the wall also sounds distorted and echoey, even though he borrows your operator's voice for talking. Media, and pop culture in general, has long conditioned us to associate such vocal distortion with sinister danger, so there isn't any need to overcomplicate things. Much more interesting and important is the ever-present rap, tap, tap, because it is a sound tool that can be used to indicate the man in the wall's presence even if he doesn't visually appear on screen. Another important aspect of why the man in the wall comes across as sinister is that the first time we see him, it's in the Chains of Harrow, so that is our baseline expectation of him. And then there is his habit of appearing out of nowhere and disappearing just as quickly. Often he pops in to just laugh at you, like the world's most annoying fly buzzing in your ears. Actually, there is something almost carefree about the majority of his interactions with you, the player. It always feels like he knows exactly what is going on, even if you don't yet, and he can therefore afford to be careless. That, together with the mocking and verbal torment, paints a picture of a being that has the upper hand, and he knows it. After all, how could you possibly fight against the void? It's also worth mentioning that there is a sense of escalation to the man in the wall's appearances. First, you experience his existence and danger he poses second-hand via Rel in the Chains of Harrow. There, the man in the wall is both sinister and clearly a dangerous threat, but since it is not directed at you at the moment, there is a certain sense of detachment. The first point of escalation is the danger moving onto you, even if it's indirect. Jump scares, teasing, laughter, but nothing concrete just yet. Only a subtle reminder that it's you who holds his gaze now, not Rel. As you progress the main questline, the man in the wall takes a backseat, only to abruptly remind you of his presence at the very end of the new war. That is another point of escalation. He appears not as the expected reflection of your character, but as a giant carving. And he speaks in the void tongue, and it is directed at you. If before he was watching you from the corner of his eye, intrigued, now you have his full attention. And that's most likely not a good thing to have. Just ask Albrecht. The last point of escalation is him directly starting to demand things from you, as we have seen during the Whispers in the Walls. This quest also drives home the sense of despair the man in the wall's constant presence everywhere evokes. You cannot escape from him. You can only delay the inevitable. And even Albrecht's super long time travel involving delay is ultimately just that, a delay. Not that Albrecht thinks that. I bet he has some super convoluted plan he is convinced will 100% work, even if he has to sacrifice all the pawns on the chessboard. But back to the void entity. Let's look more broadly at what the implications of the man in the wall being called the indifference are. To be indifferent means also to be impartial, to not care either way, neither loving nor hating. I assume that by describing the man in the wall as such, the characters in-game are trying to communicate that he doesn't care who he hurts and how much he destroys, because, by his very nature, he cannot. I likened the man in the wall to a natural disaster before, and I will do it again here, because I feel that it's the most apt comparison. A hurricane is dangerous and indifferent to the danger it causes, in the sense that it doesn't prioritize specific targets over others, but it isn't evil per se. It just is. And because it doesn't comprehend its own destruction, it cannot be reasoned with. It simply acts in accordance with its nature, and we, as people, cannot destroy it, only avoid or try surviving it. And to me, personally, the man in the wall feels very much the same. Granted, we have no idea how self-aware he actually is. Meaning, how much does he recognize that his own actions hurt others, and if his indifference is born out of malice? Is he tormenting people because he chooses to, and just doesn't care about his targets, and that's his indifference? Or are his actions a result of his innate nature, and even though we would consider them to be hurtful, for him they simply are? After all, it would be foolish to ascribe human morality to an eldritch horror from beyond the stars. Regardless of his nature and intentions, the man in the wall's actions do come across as at least indifferent, if not deliberately cruel. He tormented Rel for who knows how long. He clearly has no regard for the creatures whose minds and bodies he twists, void angels, and he definitely doesn't care for all the lives lost in the void. So, that was a very roundabout way to say that yes, the man in the wall is, for all intent and purposes, indifferent, and calling him as such is the best description of him that we have. But being indifferent doesn't necessarily mean being unfeeling, and this little nuance right here has the potential to take the man in the wall as a character to some interesting places. Ultimately, it all depends on what digital extremes decide to do with him, of course, but it's fun to speculate. In summary, the man in the wall is built, to always be subtly threatening, always there, lurking in the shadows. He brings a certain tension to any interactions with the void and void-related things, such as Kuwa, and in general expands the scale of any possible future conflict. He acts in a way that indicates that he has a will, and thus you, the player, cannot help but ask, what is his goal? What does he want? Why is he doing all of this? Part 3. Goal. The short answer to that very question is, we don't know. He's clearly after Albrecht, but we don't know why. It could be curiosity, vengeance, boredom, really anything at all. For all the man in the wall is no longer unseen, he is still very much unknown and is thus posed to be a constant threat. After all, that's the basic principle of horror. In the absence of something solid, your brain fills the empty space on its own, which results in a thing much scarier than anything the authors could have come up with. There is nothing more terrifying than the unknown. And this applies to the man in the wall as well. The less we know about his plans and motives, the scarier he is, because he is doing something. It just isn't clear what that something is. And that's on purpose. What could an all-powerful void entity possibly want? To rule the rest of the universe? Or is the man in the wall trapped and wants to get out of the void? We don't even know if he got the operator involved on purpose, or if it was just something that was done out of boredom. Maybe the man in the wall shoved void powers into a random human child to watch the pretty fireworks that would inevitably follow. Or maybe it was a crucial step in some plan to get to Albrecht. Maybe the operator would make a convenient vessel for the man in the wall to use. Another thing we don't know is how separate you, as the player, actually are from the void entity. Could it just puppet you around if it really wanted to? In both the New War and Lotus Eaters, the Lotus seems to act as your shield in whatever capacity she is able to. In New War, she closes the void portal, and in Lotus Eaters, it's her voice that is battling the mad chorus from the void, presumably making it less likely to get to you, the player. That would imply that you are in danger of being directly influenced by the man in the wall, or maybe the void itself. This leads us to another obvious question. Do we need to know the man in the wall's full intent? The answer there is maybe. Let me elaborate. Do you need to know the full story to conclude that the man in the wall is dangerous and needs to be stopped? No. You have enough pieces to reach that conclusion. But do you want to know the whole thing? I bet you do. Does knowing his full intentions change your decision to stop him? Potentially. In the broad sense of things, I'm almost certain the answer will remain, we need to stop him. But on a more personal level, especially regarding certain Orokin time-traveling scientists, now that's another question altogether. Because I don't know about you, but I would absolutely just throw Albrecht at the man in the wall because I do not care about his hero complex in the slightest. I mean, yeah, Lloyd would be sad, but Lloyd also has horrible tastes in men and needs to move on from this toxic relationship. Look, if it ends up being that allowing the man in the wall get to Albrecht means the end of the universe, the stupid Orokin man gets to live. But otherwise, he's a toast. And I promise that's the end of my Albrecht slander. Another thing to consider with the man in the wall is you're not trying to stop him because he did something to you personally. It's more on the general principle of him being a terrifying creature from the void. And that he gives us no reason not to consider him a dangerous threat. I mean, yes, he did do something to you, the player, but it isn't like it was with Ballas, where it was personal at first, and then there was an obvious existential threat added to the mix, with the sun and all. Fighting the man in the wall is sort of an inherited duty. The latter, more personal experience, only strengthens your resolve, but isn't necessarily the primary motivator. The final question then is not only can we stop him, but also do we want to stop him? From getting Albrecht, I mean. We probably do want to stop him from messing with the universe more. Then again, for all the psychological torment and destruction of others, the man in the wall did technically help you several times. And that is definitely not gonna be without consequences. Part 4. Role in the narrative. In this last part, we are gonna take a closer look at the man in the wall's role in the narrative. In other words, what is he even here for? Well, first of all, he is there to show you that the universe is much bigger and much more dangerous than you originally thought. That the mysterious empty void isn't as empty as everyone thought, and that traversing it isn't without consequences. It makes you wonder what exactly the price for your own extraordinary abilities is going to be. He is also a reminder that for all your Warframes, skills and overall martial prowess, you, the player, aren't the most powerful being around, and that there are things way beyond your skill level. Not all threats can be punched into submission or talked into changing their course. The man in the wall also serves as a great contrast to the more human, more personal antagonists like Ballas or, potentially, Albrecht. Ballas ended up being a danger to the whole universe, yes, but your conflict with him was initially purely personal, the Lotus's kidnapping. Ballas also was undeniably human, with human flaws and with motivations that were easy to understand, even if one disagreed with them. Same goes to Albrecht, who isn't openly antagonistic to you, the player, at this point in the story, but nevertheless serves as a contrast to the man in the wall's general destruction. Where the man in the wall is indifferent in his harm, Albrecht serves pain with surgical precision and the coldness of a rational man. Both work so well because they have each other to contrast with. The man in the wall may also be a gateway for more wacky space magic. I mean, if there is something called the Void, who's to say there aren't many more places like that? Or that there are more entities like him, or potentially worse, unlike him. He may also simply be an opportunity to further explore one of the main themes of the game, kindness. Love is explicitly stated to be the main weapon against the man in the wall, after all. How else do you fight indifference than with a strong emotion? On top of that, there is a strong narrative theme of not choosing indifference in the Hex story chapter. From that angle, the man in the wall is an embodiment of the notion of indifference that you can refuse and physically walk away from. And yes, bonds between people and emotions are most certainly going to be an important aspect of the story in the future. Who knows, maybe Drifter is gonna teach the man in the wall what feelings are. Gotta carry on the legacy of a space therapist after all. So yeah, that was my analysis of Warframe's The Man in the Wall. I feel like I should point out again, since some people have the attention span of a tired goldfish, that the point of this video essay wasn't to try to figure out what the Man in the Wall is, but to see if he works as a character in the narrative and why. What role he as an antagonist fulfills, not necessarily what role the indifference plays. Because for me, there is a difference between the man in the wall as an entity that is indifferent and the indifference, and especially when it comes to a story analysis. Because for all they are the same, they also aren't. And when one tries to do any sort of analyzing, that is a distinction that can change the reading. But enough of that, it's time for conclusion. One of the main reasons the man in the wall works as well as he does is the build-up. He is carefully built over a long time, so you get used to him, but never get fully comfortable with his presence. He's a known force, even if you personally didn't know about him for a long time. He is fully realized and established, but most importantly, he is consistent. He's always there, always watching, and always ready to remind you that you cannot escape. He affects others and not only you. This helps to make him feel more real, that he exists outside the player as an independent entity. That's a pitfall games sometimes fall into, where things only happen when the player is there and everything always hinges on them. Good for making the player feel important, but horrible for making the world and story feel immersive. There's also the sense of escalation to the man in the wall's interactions with the player, as I mentioned before. Once again, the man in the wall exists in contrast with other human antagonists, and therefore his inhuman characteristics stand out more clearly. On that point, he is not carrying the role of an antagonist alone, and the story can afford to build him up slowly, and also keep him shrouded in mystery. In other words, even if his motivation turns out to be cause as much chaos as possible, it's okay, since we have other antagonists with much more personal motivations. The man in the wall is also not the end-all be-all. He is a significant danger, yes, but even if you defeat him, if we entertain the notion that he can be defeated, the universe won't suddenly be fixed. The creepy horror will be gone, yeah, but the mundane evil will remain. And last, but not least, there's the good old sense of the unknown. Let your own brain fill in the blanks between the dreaded
Tap.
So yeah, that's it. For those of you who made it through the entire video, thank you. I really appreciate that. I chose this topic for my analysis because I thought it would be a good starting point. Something simple and straightforward before I move on to more complex topics to let me try out the medium. We shall valiantly ignore the fact this video turned out to be almost an hour long, yes? If you enjoyed my analysis, feel free to like this video and subscribe. I hear the YouTube algorithm likes that. And if you are so inclined, leave a comment. Tell me about your Warframe experiences. Did you find the Chains of Heroes scary? Or did that not work for you at all? I'm always up for a discussion. Just keep it polite, would you? Angry yelling is a waste of everyone's time. You can find me on other social media under the same name. Mostly. Links will also be in the description below. I do art, cosplay, and I also write. If you like this video and are feeling generous, you can tip me on coffee. Just don't get jump scared by the old art on that site. I admit I am not keeping it as up to date as I probably should. It has been a pleasure to have you here, traveler. So, until next time, safe journeys.